Some people spend their entire lives trying to escape a single night. Others spend their entire lives trying to understand it. 20 years after a frightened African waitress collapsed in the rain outside a Seoul restaurant, her son would stand in a courtroom with enough evidence to send Korea's most feared mafia boss to prison for the rest of his life. He believed he was about to destroy a monster. He had no idea that the man sitting quietly at the defense table was the only reason he had ever been born. Some debts are paid with money, some with blood, but the rarest debts are paid with the truth. If stories about unexpected mercy, impossible choices, and shocking courtroom twists keep you watching until the very end, welcome to the AfroK Tales. Subscribe now because this story is only getting started, and trust me, the ending will change everything you think you know. The rain arrived over Seoul without asking permission. It slammed against rooftops, flooded narrow alleyways, and washed the neon lights of Gangnam into streaks of trembling color across the pavement. Most people hurried indoors. Kang Min-jae walked into the storm. At 41 years old, he ruled an empire that officially didn't exist. Shipping companies, luxury hotels, construction firms, import businesses. Every document said legitimate. Every rival knew better. People called him the Shadow King because no one ever proved anything against him. Witnesses forgot. Evidence disappeared. Enemies either apologized or vanished. Min-jae preferred silence over spectacle. Violence, he often said, should be like expensive perfume. Powerful enough to be remembered, never loud enough to announce itself. That evening he was supposed to meet investors from Busan inside an upscale restaurant overlooking the Han River. Instead, he heard someone scream. Not the dramatic scream of someone trying to attract attention. The desperate scream of someone who had already realized nobody was coming. Min-jae stopped walking. His bodyguards exchanged uneasy glances. One of them leaned closer. "Chairman, we're already late." Min-jae didn't answer. The scream came again, this time weaker, from the alley beside the restaurant. He turned the corner. 3 men surrounded a young woman whose restaurant uniform was soaked with rain and streaked with dirt. She couldn't have been older than 26. Dark skin, curly hair plastered against her face. One arm wrapped protectively around her swollen stomach. 8 months pregnant. One man grabbed her shoulder. "You've had 6 months," he snapped in Korean. "You borrowed the money. You pay it back." "I lost my husband," she whispered. "I just need more time." "You've had enough time." Another man laughed. "If you can't pay cash, you'll work." The woman stiffened. "I said no." "You don't get to say no." The third man reached toward her. She slapped his hand away. For one brief second, the alley became perfectly still. Then the first punch landed. She collapsed against the wall. One hand never left her stomach. Not once. Min-jae watched quietly. His expression never changed. One bodyguard stepped forward. "Should we handle it?" Min-jae asked a different question. "How many?" The bodyguard blinked. "Chairman, how many men hit a pregnant woman?" The guard looked back. 3. Min-jae nodded once. "So no one leaves standing." The alley erupted. His men moved with terrifying precision. No shouting. No unnecessary cruelty. Just brutal efficiency. Within seconds, all 3 loan sharks were lying in the rain, groaning through broken teeth and shattered pride. The pregnant woman stared in disbelief. She expected another demand, another threat, another price. Instead, the tall stranger crouched in front of her. "Can you stand?" She hesitated. "Who are you?" "My name isn't important. You saved me. For tonight." He offered his hand. She ignored it and struggled to stand by herself. Even exhausted, even terrified, she refused pity. Something about that made Min-jae pause. Most people accepted help. This woman negotiated with dignity. "What is your name?" he asked. "Nia." "Where are you from?" "Nigeria." "And your husband?" Her eyes filled for the first time. "He died 6 months ago." No tears fell. Just silence. The kind that hurt more. One of Min-jae's men searched the attackers. They're working for the Beck Syndicate. Min Jae's eyes narrowed slightly. That explained everything. The Beck Syndicate didn't lend money. They recruited victims. Young women disappeared through debts they could never repay. Officially, they became overseas workers. Unofficially, they were never seen again. He looked back at Nia. How much? She frowned. What? How much do you owe? I'll pay it myself. That's not what I asked. She looked almost offended. I'm not asking you for money. I know. I don't want charity. A slow smile appeared on Min Jae's face. Not amusement. Recognition. I didn't offer charity. Then what are you offering? A solution. Before she could answer, one of the beaten men spat blood onto the pavement. You think you've won? He laughed through broken lips. She belongs to us. The alley became cold. Not because of the rain. Because Kang Min Jae stopped smiling. He walked over without hurrying. Without raising his voice. He crouched beside the man. You made one mistake. The loan shark smirked. And what's that? You confused debt. Min Jae gently adjusted the man's crooked collar. With ownership. The smirk disappeared. Min Jae stood. Cancel everything she owes. The man laughed again. You don't give orders to. Min Jae looked at his bodyguard. Call Mr. Beck. The phone was answered almost immediately. The guard handed it over. Min Jae spoke only one sentence. Your men touched someone under my protection. Silence. Even through the rain, Nia heard a frightened voice apologizing from the speaker. The three loan sharks suddenly looked less confident. Min Jae returned the phone. They'll never bother you again. Nia stared at him. Why? He looked at her for a long moment. Perhaps because no one had ever asked him that question before. Finally, he answered honestly. I don't know. If you're already wondering who Kang Min Jae really is, and whether one decision can change two lives forever, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the AfroK Tales. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were Nia? Would you have trusted him? Or run? Nia gathered what little strength she had left. I still won't take your money. Min Jae almost laughed. You really don't make this easy. I didn't survive this long by making things easy. She turned to leave, then suddenly froze. A sharp pain crossed her face. She grabbed her stomach. The rain hid the sound at first. Then came another cry. This one wasn't fear. It was pain. Real pain. One of Min Jae's bodyguards looked alarmed. Chairman. The water beneath Nia's feet began to change color. Her breathing became uneven. She looked down, then back at Min Jae. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I think. She closed her eyes. The baby is coming. The first contraction lasted less than a minute. For Nia Okafor, felt like an eternity. She doubled over, one hand gripping the rain-soaked brick wall while the other protected her stomach with fierce determination. Her breathing became shallow, not because of the pain, because she knew exactly what she couldn't afford. A hospital. Not after 6 months of unpaid bills. Not after her husband's death had left her drowning in debt. Not after everyone she earned serving tables disappeared before she even touched it. She closed her eyes. Not tonight, she whispered to her unborn child. Please, just not tonight. Kang Min Jae had heard men beg for their lives. He had heard businessmen beg for another chance. He had heard rivals beg for mercy moments before disappearing forever. None of those voices unsettled him. This one did. He looked at his driver. The hospital. The driver hesitated. Chairman. The police. I wasn't asking for your opinion. The luxury sedan stopped in front of them before the sentence had finished. One bodyguard carefully opened the rear door. Min Jae stepped aside. Nia didn't move. I told you, she said through clenched teeth. I don't want your money. This isn't about money. It always is. He looked directly into her eyes. No. She searched his face. She expected calculation, expectation, hidden conditions. Instead, she found something she couldn't explain. Impatience. Not the impatience of a powerful man being inconvenienced, the impatience of someone who genuinely didn't understand why she was still standing in the rain. Another contraction hit. Her knees almost gave way. Without asking permission, Min-jae caught her before she hit the ground. For a brief moment, the feared Shadow King held a frightened stranger as gently as if she were made of glass. "You can hate me tomorrow," he said quietly, "but your child deserves tonight." For the first time since he'd entered the alley, Nia stopped arguing. The emergency department exploded into motion. Doctors surrounded her. Nurses asked questions faster than she could answer. Monitors beeped. Footsteps echoed. Medical terms filled the air. Min-jae remained outside the delivery room. He disliked hospitals. Too many memories. Too many reminders that power ended where mortality began. His chief lieutenant, Choi Sung-ho, approached cautiously. "This isn't like you." Min-jae didn't answer. "You've delayed 2 meetings." Silence. The Busan investors left. Still silence. Sung-ho frowned. "Chairman." Finally, Min-jae spoke. "Do you know why I hate hospitals?" "No. Because nobody cares who you are in here." He watched doctors rush past. "In here, everyone eventually becomes just another person praying someone they love survives." Sung-ho had served Min-jae for 17 years. He had seen him negotiate wars between syndicates. He had watched him stare down prosecutors without blinking. He had never heard him sound human. 3 hours later, a doctor emerged. "Mr. Kong." Min-jae looked up. "The mother is stable." He released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "And the baby?" The doctor smiled. "A healthy boy." For reasons he couldn't explain, Min-jae smiled back. Felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. "He weighs 3.4 kilograms. The doctor chuckled. "He already has a powerful voice." A cry echoed faintly down the corridor. Strong, defiant, alive. Min-jae listened quietly, then turned to leave. "Chairman," the doctor called after him. "The mother asked to see you." Nia looked exhausted, but her eyes remained sharp. She held the tiny baby against her chest with protective certainty. When Min-jae entered, she nodded toward the chair beside the bed. "You should meet him." "I don't think that's necessary." "I do." Reluctantly, he sat down. The baby slept peacefully, completely unaware that one of Korea's most feared men was staring at him with visible uncertainty. "Have you chosen a name?" Min-jae asked. She smiled faintly. "Daniel. A good name. It means—" "I know what it means." She looked surprised. "God is my judge." Nia nodded. "My husband chose it before he died." Silence settled between them. Finally, she spoke. "Why did you help me?" "You asked that already." "You never answered." Min-jae leaned back. "I suppose." He searched for words. "Because 20 years ago." He stopped. Nia noticed. "Because what?" He looked out the window. "When I was 12, my mother died because nobody stopped to help." The room became completely still. It was snowing. His voice remained calm. People walked around her. They thought someone else would stop. No one did. He looked at Daniel. "I decided a long time ago, if I ever saw someone standing where she once stood." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Nia understood. The next morning, the hospital administrator approached Nia's room carrying several documents. "Your outstanding medical balance has been cleared." Nia frowned. "There must be a mistake." "No." The payment was made anonymously. She immediately knew. "No." The administrator blinked. "I'm sorry. I won't accept it." The elderly woman smiled kindly. "My dear, it's already been paid." Nia looked toward the doorway. Min-jae was standing there, ready to leave. She hurried after him. "You can't keep doing this." He stopped walking. "I've done exactly one thing. You paid everything. I removed an obstacle. You don't even know me." He smiled faintly. "I know enough." She folded her arms. "I'm going to pay you back." His bodyguards exchanged amused glances. Nobody had ever spoken to Kang Min-jae like this. He looked genuinely thoughtful. If it helps your pride, he said, consider it a loan. She extended her hand. Then I promise I'll repay everyone. Instead of shaking it, Min-jae looked at baby Daniel sleeping in her arms. Raise him well. I will. Raise him to become the kind of man who never needs people like me. Nia followed his gaze. He will. Min-jae finally shook her hand. Then we're even. He turned to leave. Halfway down the hallway, Nia called after him. Wait. He stopped. At least tell me your name. For several seconds, he considered lying. It would have been safer, simpler. Instead, he answered. Kang Min-jae. Her face changed instantly. Every newspaper, every television report, every whispered rumor. She knew exactly who he was. The Shadow King. The man mothers warned their children about. The man politicians pretended not to know. The man prosecutors had spent years trying to imprison. She looked down at her sleeping son, then back at Min-jae. I'll pray for you. His bodyguards almost laughed. Nobody, absolutely nobody, had ever offered to pray for Kang Min-jae. He gave the smallest nod. I suspect, he said quietly, I'll need it. Then he walked away. Nia never saw him again, or so she believed. If the story has touched your heart so far, don't forget to subscribe to the AfroK Tales. Stories like this remind us that one unexpected act of kindness can echo across decades. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Do you think people can truly change, no matter what they've done in the past? 20 years passed faster than either of them could have imagined. Daniel Okafor grew into exactly the man his mother had promised he would become. Disciplined, brilliant, uncompromising. The youngest prosecutor ever appointed to Seoul's organized crime division. He believed one thing above all else. No one is above the law. His office wall displayed photographs of Korea's most wanted crime bosses. One picture hung at the very center. A man with silver beginning to streak his black hair. Sharp eyes. An unreadable expression. Under the photograph were 4 words. Kang Min-jae, primary target. Daniel studied the picture every morning before work. One day, he promised himself he would be the prosecutor who finally brought the Shadow King to justice. He never noticed that every evening, when his mother passed that same photograph on the television news, she quietly whispered a prayer for the man her son had sworn to destroy. 20 years can change a man's face. They can soften his voice. They can bend his shoulders beneath the weight of time. But they cannot erase the choices that made him. By the time Kang Min-jae turned 61, Seoul no longer whispered his name with the same fear it once had. People still called him the Shadow King. But the empire had changed. At least, that was what he believed. The violence had become rarer. The legitimate businesses had become larger. He had quietly shut down operations that had once made him rich because, somewhere over the years, he found himself remembering a Nigerian waitress who had looked him in the eyes and refused to be bought. Strangely, her courage had become the voice inside his head whenever he signed another contract. He never saw her again. He never tried to. Promise once made deserved respect. If she wanted her son to grow up without knowing his name, he would honor it. He told himself she had probably returned to Africa, married again, built a peaceful life. He hoped she had, because people who crossed paths with Kang Min-jae rarely found peace. Across the city, Daniel Okafor walked into the Seoul Central Prosecutor's office carrying a file thick enough to fill an entire briefcase. Every prosecutor in the building stopped to watch. Someone whispered, "That's the Kang file." Another replied, "It's finally happening." For 20 years, every administration had promised to bring down Kang Min-jae. Every investigation had failed. Witnesses disappeared. Financial records vanished. Trials collapsed. The Shadow King always walked away. Until today, Daniel entered the conference room. 3 senior prosecutors were already waiting. At the head of the table sat Prosecutor General Lee Sung-ho. He folded his hands. "Mr. Okafor." Daniel nodded respectfully. "You asked for this meeting." "I did." "Tell me." Daniel placed the file on the table. I can prove that Kang Min-jae personally ordered international money laundering, tax fraud, bribery, and organized criminal operations through 12 shell companies. Silence. The prosecutor general slowly opened the file. His eyebrows rose. This is. He turned another page. Remarkably complete. It took 18 months. And where did this evidence come from? Daniel answered without hesitation. A confidential insider. Someone inside Kang's organization? Yes. The room became noticeably quieter. One of the senior prosecutors frowned. That's unusual. Daniel looked up. What is? The evidence. He tapped the stack of documents. It's too clean. Daniel blinked. I'm sorry. In organized crime investigations, the older prosecutor said, you usually spend years assembling fragments. He flipped through page after page. This, he looked at Daniel, is a finished puzzle. Daniel had heard that criticism before. He dismissed it every time. The documents have been verified. The bank transfers? Verified. The signatures? Verified. The witnesses? Verified. The prosecutor general closed the file. Then prepare the indictment. News spread across Korea before lunchtime. Breaking news. Shadow King to face historic trial. Television stations interrupted regular programming. Reporters crowded outside Kang Group headquarters. Social media exploded. Some celebrated. Others doubted. Many simply couldn't believe it. For the first time in decades, the untouchable man looked vulnerable. Inside his office, Kang Min-jae watched the broadcast without changing expression. His oldest advisor, Choi Sung-ho, switched off the television. Chairman, Min-jae continued pouring tea. How many cameras? Hundreds. They've been waiting a long time. They think it's over. Min-jae handed Sung-ho a cup. Do you? Sung-ho hesitated, then answered honestly. I've never seen evidence like this. Neither had Min-jae. That was exactly what bothered him. He opened the indictment. Every transaction was documented. Every company connected. Every signature authenticated. Every timeline perfect. Too perfect. He quietly reached the final page, then smiled. Sung-ho looked confused. Chairman, they're lying. You can prove that? No. Then why smile? Min-jae closed the folder. Because whoever built this, he tapped the papers, knows my business almost as well as I do. That evening, Daniel visited his mother. Nia still lived in the modest apartment where she had raised him. Nothing expensive. Nothing unnecessary. She believed comfort came from peace, not possessions. Daniel kissed her forehead. You've been working too hard. She laughed. I was about to tell you the same thing. He noticed the television. His own face appeared on the news. Lead prosecutor Daniel Okafor says no one is above the law. Nia's smile disappeared. You really believe this case? I do. You've seen all the evidence? Every page. She looked away. I met Kang Min-jae once. Daniel froze. What? It was years ago. How many years? She hesitated. Before you were born. Daniel stared at her. You've never told me that. It wasn't important. It wasn't important? He helped me once. Daniel frowned. Helped you? She nodded slowly. He wasn't the man everyone believes. Daniel sighed. Mom. Nia. No. He spoke gently. Good people don't build criminal empires. No. They don't. They don't disappear witnesses. No. They don't buy judges. No. She looked at him. But sometimes. Her voice softened. They save strangers. Daniel stood. You don't know him. Neither of them noticed the photograph sitting inside an old wooden box beneath her bed. A faded hospital picture. A newborn baby. A young Nigerian mother. And standing quietly in the background, a man preparing to leave before the camera had accidentally captured him. Kang Min-jae. 3 days later, the trial began. Hundreds of journalists lined the courthouse steps before sunrise. Police blocked entire streets. Television helicopters circled overhead. Inside the courtroom, Daniel organized his files with calm precision. He had imagined this day since law school. Across the room, the doors opened. Kang Min-jae entered without bodyguards, without ceremony, without fear. He looked older than the man in the photographs. Not weaker, simply tired. For one brief moment, their eyes met. Daniel expected arrogance. Instead, he found curiosity, as if the old man were trying to remember something he couldn't quite reach. Min-jae sat beside his attorneys. He glanced toward the prosecution table once more. Something about the young prosecutor seemed strangely familiar. The shape of his eyes, the way he stood, the quiet confidence. A memory stirred. Rain. A hospital corridor. A tiny baby wrapped in blue. Before he could grasp it, the judge entered. All rise. The courtroom stood. The trial that all of Korea had waited 20 years to witness had finally begun. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe to the AfroK Tales. You're about to witness the moment where everything changes. And tell me in the comments. If you discovered someone you hated had once saved your family, would it change your judgment? Or would justice still come first? As Daniel rose to deliver his opening statement, he looked directly at Kang Min-jae. My name is Daniel Okafor. For the first time, the old Mafia boss's heartbeat skipped. Okafor. The name hit him like an echo from another lifetime. He looked more closely at the young prosecutor. Dark skin, steady eyes, a calm voice. Then, he remembered the promise he had made in a hospital hallway 20 years earlier. Raise him to become the kind of man who never needs people like me. Min-jae lowered his eyes. A faint, almost invisible smile crossed his face. Without realizing it, the little boy had kept that promise. The tragedy was that neither of them yet understood what it would cost. The prosecution's case began exactly as the nation expected. Measured, methodical, merciless. Daniel Okafor stood before the judges with the confidence of a man who believed every page in front of him. We will prove, he began, that Kang Min-jae created and directed a criminal enterprise that laundered billions of won through shipping companies, construction firms, and offshore accounts. A large screen behind him illuminated with bank transfers, company registrations, and financial records. One document after another. Every piece of evidence fit perfectly. Too perfectly. The judges listened carefully. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras clicked without pause. Across the courtroom, Kang Min-jae remained completely still. His lawyers whispered strategy. He barely heard them. His eyes never left Daniel. Not because he feared the young prosecutor. Because every time Daniel spoke, he heard the echo of a promise made 2 decades earlier. Raise him to become the kind of man who never needs people like me. Nia had kept her word. She had raised a man who believed in justice with every part of his soul. Min-jae wondered if that alone was worth everything he was about to lose. The trial continued for 3 days. Witness after witness appeared. Former accountants, shipping managers, financial experts. Every testimony strengthened the prosecution. Public opinion shifted rapidly. News headlines declared, "The Shadow King's empire finally collapses." Even Min-jae's oldest allies began disappearing. Phone calls went unanswered. Longtime partners resigned. Fear had finally changed sides. On the 4th morning, Daniel arrived early. He wanted one last review of the financial records before presenting his closing evidence. As he entered the evidence room, he noticed something strange. One folder sat slightly apart from the others. He was certain it hadn't been there yesterday. There was no label, only a handwritten note. If you truly believe in justice, read this before you speak. Daniel looked around. The room was empty. He opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of bank records dating back 23 years, older than every document in his investigation. His heartbeat slowed, then quickened. One account number appeared repeatedly. It didn't belong to Kang Min-jae. It belonged to someone else. A respected businessman, government advisor, philanthropist, Chairman Park Sung-jin. Daniel frowned. He recognized the name immediately. Chairman Park had spent years publicly campaigning against organized crime. He had testified before Parliament. He had even received national honors. None of that made sense. Daniel turned another page. Then another. The shell companies. The offshore transfers. The forged signatures. The pattern was unmistakable. Someone had quietly redirected criminal operations through Kang Min-jae's businesses, while building an entirely separate empire beyond public scrutiny. And the evidence had begun, years before the crimes attributed to Min-jae. Daniel's breathing became uneven. He checked the authentication seals. Every document was genuine. Someone had hidden the truth. For decades, before the afternoon session began, Daniel went directly to the prosecutor general. "You need to see this." The older man reviewed the file. His expression darkened. "Where did you get these?" "I don't know. Can you verify them?" "I already started." "Are they real?" Daniel answered quietly. "Yes." The prosecutor general closed the folder. "If this is authentic," he looked up, "our entire case changes." Meanwhile, Nia sat quietly in the public gallery. She had attended every day of the trial, hidden beneath a simple scarf, watching, praying, not for acquittal, not for conviction, only for truth. Across the room, Kang Min-jae noticed her. 20 years had changed her face, but not her eyes. He smiled almost imperceptibly. She returned the smallest nod. No words. None were needed. The courtroom reconvened. Daniel rose to deliver what everyone expected would be his final argument. Instead, he surprised the entire country. "Your Honors." His voice remained steady. "The prosecution requests permission to amend its position." The courtroom erupted. Journalists exchanged confused glances. The lead judge raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Daniel took a slow breath. "My duty is not to secure convictions." He looked toward Kang Min-jae. "My duty," he paused, "is to pursue justice." He lifted the newly discovered folder. "This morning, evidence came into my possession that fundamentally changes the facts before this court." The room fell silent. Every camera turned toward him. For the next hour, Daniel dismantled his own case. Not recklessly, carefully, methodically. He exposed forged timelines, hidden financial transfers, secret partnerships, government corruption. One name appeared again and again. Chairman Park Sung-jin. Gasps spread through the gallery. Several officials quietly left the courtroom. They already knew what was coming. Arrest warrants, investigations, political collapse. The judges ordered an immediate suspension. Chairman Park was detained before sunset. His offices were searched overnight. By dawn, investigators had uncovered enough evidence to expose one of the largest corruption networks in modern Korean history. Kang Min-jae had committed crimes in his past. No one denied that, but he had not committed these crimes. Someone else had built an empire by hiding behind the reputation of a man everyone already feared. After the hearing, the courthouse slowly emptied. Daniel remained alone inside one of the consultation rooms. The door opened quietly. His mother entered. She carried an old photograph. Without speaking, she placed it on the table. Daniel looked down. His own newborn face. His mother. A hospital bed. Then, standing near the doorway, Kang Min-jae. Daniel frowned. "What is this?" Nia sat beside him. "It's the day you were born." He looked again. "Why is he there?" She closed her eyes briefly. "Because..." Her voice trembled for the first time in years. "Without him..." She gently touched the photograph. "There would never have been a day for you to be born." Everything stopped. The courtroom, the investigation, the headlines. None of it mattered. Daniel listened as his mother told him about the rainy night, the alley, the loan sharks, the hospital, the anonymous payment, the promise. By the time she finished, he couldn't speak. He finally whispered, "I tried to imprison the man who saved you." Nia shook her head. "No." She smiled softly. You tried to hold every powerful man accountable. She reached for his hand. That's exactly the kind of son he hoped I would raise. A week later, Kang Min-jae requested a private meeting with Daniel. No lawyers, no bodyguards, just the two of them. When Daniel entered, the older man stood. You've grown into a remarkable prosecutor. Daniel smiled faintly. You knew. I suspected. Why didn't you tell me? Min-jae looked out the window. Because your mother asked me to disappear from your life. And you kept your promise. I owed her that much. Silence settled between them. Finally, Min-jae spoke again. I wasn't an innocent man, Daniel. I know. I've done things no court will ever fully uncover. Daniel nodded. I know that too. Min-jae slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside were names, hidden accounts, corrupt officials, remaining criminal networks. I've spent years trying to leave that world. He looked directly at Daniel. I think it's time I finish. Daniel stared at the documents. This could destroy everything that's left. Min-jae smiled. Good. For the first time in decades, the Shadow King wasn't protecting an empire. He was helping dismantle it. Months later, the proceeds from Kang Group's legitimate businesses established a foundation jointly proposed by Nia and Daniel. Not in Min-jae's name, at his own request. Its mission was simple: legal aid for immigrants, emergency shelters for abused women, scholarships for children who had lost parents. Every winter, 3 people met quietly beneath the same alley where everything had begun. No cameras, no reporters, just warm meals left for anyone who needed them. One snowy evening, Daniel looked at Min-jae and asked, "Do you ever regret stopping that night?" The older man watched steam rise from the food containers, then smiled. I thought I was saving one frightened mother. He glanced at Daniel. I didn't know I was saving the man who would one day remind me that justice and mercy don't have to be enemies. Snow continued to fall over Seoul, covering old footprints, making room for new ones. And somewhere beyond the city lights, another frightened stranger would someday discover what Kang Min-jae had learned too late. The strongest empires are never built on fear. They're built one act of unexpected kindness at a time. The end. If this story has reminded you that justice must always follow the truth, not assumptions, please like this video and subscribe to the AfroK Tales. And tell us in the comments, did Kang Min-jae deserve redemption, or should his past have outweighed his good deeds? We'd love to hear your thoughts.